Good morning from Washington, D.C., and good afternoon or evening for our viewers in Europe and elsewhere. I'm Fred Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. Welcome to our audience across a myriad of platforms across the world. Thank you all for joining us today for this timely event, Infrastructure Investment and Central Europe, the 3 Cs Initiative. And what an all-star cast we have today. We have Dr. Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. We have Her Excellency Kirsta Kaljulaid, President of the Republic of Estonia, and Her Excellency Kadri Simson, European Commissioner for Energy. We're very much looking forward to this discussion. I'll get back to introducing all 3 of you individually in a moment. As we approach the October 19th 3C Summit, hosted by the President of Estonia, the region faces unprecedented challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has upended our world, disrupting economic growth and dramatically transforming global priorities, and we've got some way to go. The 3 Cs Initiative is vital to development and interconnectivity in the 12 countries between the Black, Baltic, and Adriatic Seas, hence the name 3 Cs. This initiative was launched and has been led by the countries of Central Europe to address an infrastructure gap left over from the Soviet era, a deficit in cross-border infrastructure amounting to well more than $500 billion. The 3 Cs Initiative, with its objective of advancing cross-border energy, transport, and digital infrastructure in the region, has only become more important as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. The need to address these infrastructure gaps is crucial in helping to secure economic strength for this region and the rest of Europe. The 3 Cs has never been a small undertaking. It is geoeconomically and geopolitically ambitious. Now its successful implementation will be even more significant in rebuilding the region's economic growth as the world recovers from the economic shock of coronavirus. The 3 Cs Initiative has been a key pillar of our work at the Atlantic Council for a long time, led by the indomitable Ian Brzezinski and the future Europe Initiative team under Ben Haddad. Ever since the report, co-authored by General Jim Jones in 2014, launched the concept of what we called then a North-South corridor. We hope this initiative can reinforce the region's and indeed all of Europe's economic resilience in an era of extraordinary challenge. We also hope it will contribute to the completion of Europe that is whole, undivided, free, and prosperous. Earlier this year, a commercially managed 3 Cs Initiative Investment Fund was launched to make the ambitions of the 3 Cs Initiative more of a reality. The fund will finance the region's cross-border projects with countries across the region. It is fully operational, assessing a pipeline of potential investments. The United States is also invested in the region's success, pledging up to $1 billion through its International Development Finance Corporation to support the fund and the 3 Cs energy projects and the 3 Cs projects, as highlighted in U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's announcement at the Munich Security Conference earlier this year. As the region grapples with today's challenges and leverages the 3 Cs Initiative in its recovery, the International Monetary Fund's landmark study, the title of that study is Infrastructure in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe, Benchmarking, Macroeconomic Impact, and Policy Issues, will offer a roadmap to help countries of the region maximize the benefits of infrastructure investment. Before we begin, I invite you to join this virtual conversation by using the hashtag 3Cs, so hashtag 3Cs, and then submitting your questions via the Q&A function on Zoom. So on the Q&A function on Zoom, if you could put in your questions and we'll get to them. On that note, again, I'm delighted to welcome these 3 remarkable women who are a driving force in so many respects and in this respect as well. First, let me introduce Dr. Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. She previously served as the interim president of the World Bank Group and helped shape the agenda of the European Union as the vice president. Unfortunately, I think we put up we didn't put up the managing director, but in any case, helped shape the agenda of the European Union as the vice president for the budget and human resources for the European Commission. Madam Managing Director, thank you for sharing your time with us. I'd also like to tell everyone on camera right now across the world that on October 14th, the Atlantic Council will be giving the Managing Director our highest honor, our Distinguished Leadership Award, not just for what she's accomplished in her remarkable career, but also through her honoring the IMF for all of its accomplishments, particularly in this difficult time of COVID-19. Next, it's a privilege to welcome the President Kersti Kaljulaid, who has served as President of Estonia since 2016. President Kaljulaid stands out among Europe's most, I would say, not only Europe's, but one of the world's most dynamic, effective, and visionary leaders. We're proud to partner with President Kaljulaid and the government of Estonia on this year's 3Cs Virtual Summit and web forum happening on October 19th. And it's so good to see you again, Madam President. Thank you for joining us. We're also joined from Brussels by European Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simpson. She was appointed to the European Commission in December 2019 and leads the effort to develop an integrated, interconnected European energy market. She previously served as a member of the Estonian Parliament. Madam Commissioner, we are honored to have you with us today. From what I understand, today is a rainy Brussels. Having lived in Brussels sometime myself, it was very often a rainy Brussels. We look forward to a dynamic discussion on infrastructure investment and Central Europe through the 3Cs initiative. To get us started, Madam Managing Director Georgieva, let me ask you to reflect on the current outlook as you see it for Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe, given the pandemic, and if you could also touch on the importance of infrastructure building at this point in time.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be together with two remarkable leaders I very much respect. And while the pandemic creates many problems, one of the few advantages is that calendars can be coordinated more easily in this virtual world. My points are going to concentrate exactly on how we see Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe in the midst of this pandemic, and what can be done by boosting infrastructure financing to accelerate the catching up these countries aspire to do with the EU 15, with the old members of the European Union. So where are we today? This crisis has been devastating everywhere, leading to a dramatic loss of output for the world, which we estimate to be, for this year and next, about $12 trillion. This is the equivalent of more than 1 year of the output of the Eurozone. And while today we see the year 2020 less bleak than we saw it a couple of months ago, because of better than anticipated performance of some advanced economies, and in particular China, we're still in a significantly negative territory in terms of growth for the year. For the Central Eastern and Southeastern European countries, what the pandemic means is to erase 3 years of economic progress. A heavy blow for a region that has made remarkable progress for the decades prior to this crisis. And this is a progress that, as somebody that comes from this region, is very dear to my heart. I witnessed it. We have seen how in the drive to improve economic performance, competitiveness, and reliance on good governance, the region has been growing on average 3% in real income. This is 2.5 times the per capita growth rate of the EU 15. And that has led to shrinking the distance with EU 15. Now the region stands at about 55% of that of EU 15. For the 11 countries that are members of the 3Cs initiative, 11 out of the 12 being Austria, the results of these improvements are even more significant. These countries are at 70% today of EU 15. But there is still a way to go. And the question is, can mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 induced economic crisis be a boost for these countries? And I tend to be positive on that. I think it can be a boost. And I would focus the second part of my comments on what you mentioned in the beginning. And it is this. I don't know whether the camera can easily show, but that is the report you indicated. The fund is launching today. It is titled Infrastructure in Central, Eastern and Southeastern Europe, Benchmarking, Macroeconomic Impact and Policy Issues. So what the report flags are three very important conclusions relevant for the 3Cs initiative. Number one, there is a significant infrastructure gap still in terms of electricity generating capacity, and I look at the commissioner with due respect. That's your area. We assess it that the gap is about 50% vis-a-vis the EU 15. And while there are countries that are remarkably strong, Estonia being among them, in internet connectivity, still the internet subscriptions for this region are fewer than those in EU 15, and in some countries actually are still significantly fewer. Physical connectivity lacks are also significant. If you take on a adjusted for arable land area basis, roads, the level in this region is 60% of the vis-a-vis the EU 15, and for railways, actually worse. It is only 40% of EU 15. So just to close this gap relative to EU 15 by 2030, that would cost countries in the Central, Eastern and Southeastern region between 3% and 8% of GDP annually. So we are talking about a very significant boost. For those that are EU members, so we are now getting more into the 3Cs initiative arena, it is a smaller gap. They're in better shape, and the gap is around 2 to 3% of GDP annually. Still not trivial. And here, I know we would hear this from President Kaluleit. Without private sector, that's just not possible to effectively close this gap. Which takes me to my second point. What the report says is that there are still issues that are on the soft end in the area of governance that are very important if private sector is to be effective and if broadly these infrastructure investments are to be effective. In other words, strong infrastructure governance is essential. It is clearly in multiple areas, from fiscal risks to opportunities for corruption, to cost overruns. And then we have cross-border projects that add an additional layer of complexity. What it means is that we have to be not only focusing on the hardware, but we need to look very carefully in eliminating those inconsistencies in regulatory terms still, and be very careful to listen to private investors. What is it that pushes them away? Why? Because while there are costs, there are also tremendous benefits. And this is my main message. For each 1% of GDP spent on infrastructure, output can increase by 0.5 to 0.75% in the short run and by 2 to 2.5% in the long run. Just imagine, with this shrinkage of output that we are experiencing, to give a boost of 0.5% to 0.75% a year over time, this is giving the necessary impetus for growth. And what we know is that right now, with low interest rate environment, long-term investors are desperately looking for opportunities to invest in long-term projects with good return. So taking that as a message to the 3Cs initiative is you would need jobs and growth, and that boost through infrastructure has the multiplier necessary for jobs and growth to materialize. And of course, that would also help the structural shifts that Europe is looking for. There are two that I want to highlight. One is the digital. Europe, we know that this crisis has accelerated digital transformation. Digital connectivity becomes absolutely a must for competitiveness. And second, dealing with climate. Europe, the President of the European Commission, and if I may ask the Commissioner, give her my best regards and huge respect for you in Europe. She lifted up the aim to 55% shrinking emissions for Europe. That can only happen if we have the infrastructure tuned towards efficiency and green. And in that sense, that transition to green and digital future that is already underway, the three Cs can boost for the participating members and for their neighbors through the spillover impact we get. Now, one of my colleagues gave me a great Estonian proverb to finish on, and I hope I got it right. It is, a mouse won't run into the mouth of a sleeping cat. In other words, the cat needs to wake up and go and chase the mouse. We need to act. And I do believe that when in 3 weeks there is a summit, the 3C summit in Tallinn, no, we won't be able to walk the streets of Tallinn, but yes, we can wake up the cat. Thank you very much.
Madam Managing Director, what a remarkable opening statement for this event. And I think we're going to get our cartoonists working on this image of the mouse running into the mouth of the sleeping cat, which doesn't work. And then we're going to wake up the cat in the event. Before I turn to President Kaljulaid to talk about how she's going to wake up the cat and whether indeed that is an Estonian saying, because that's wonderful. Let me ask you just one brief question, Madam Managing Director Georgiev. If you're looking at your report and you gave a really good review of the headline findings and conclusions of the report, so I wouldn't ask you to do that over again, and you're looking at this initiative, is there one thing that screams out to you from the report that you think people should pay most notice to? Is it the multiplier effect of infrastructure, or is there something else in the report that you think is the most important single conclusion?
Was it for me or
Sorry,
it
ma'am.
was for the?
Yeah, no, it was for you. Sorry, Madam Managing Director. I was just asking one follow-up question. If you were to look
Yeah.
at this report, what is the most important thing in the report for that sleeping cat?
Well, I believe the most important thing from the report is the criticality to pursue improvements in infrastructure, both from the side of attracting private sector finance, but also from the side of substantial improvements in the quality of governance. That has to be demonstrably there. For what we hear from the private sector side, from the money side, is there is hunger for long-term profitable investments. But there is also concern around how do we know whether we can trust infrastructure to be an asset class we rely on. So the quality of governance, and in particular the transparency of what is being set up, absolutely critical to give that sense of long-term viability of these investments. When we look at the work that has been done on infrastructure as an asset class, time and again, what comes most strongly is, can we rely on regulatory and governance predictability over long enough time to make a difference? And I think we have to be we have to concentrate. Good projects, having good projects matters. Having simplicity, regulatory simplicity and transparency around how this governance environment is going to function, as important, even if not more important.
Thank you so much for that excellent answer. President Kaljulaid, you're going to be hosting this on October 19th. So I think it would be great to have an update on the 3Cs initiative and how you're thinking about the priorities for this year's summit. But also if you could respond some to the IMF report and to the managing director's opening comment.
Yes, thank you, Kristalina, and greetings to you over there. Thanks to you. We have now on the paper with the authority of the IMF proven and quantified what we knew before. Because when the 3Cs initiative was initiated by Presidents Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović and Andrzej Duda, then there was a common feeling that the 3Cs nations, being less developed than the rest of the EU, have the opportunity for the market to invest for development. 20 years ago, private-public partnership was a big thing. Meanwhile, with the cheapening of the money, particularly public money, private capital has been somewhat fading from the picture for development. And the idea of the 3Cs initiative has always been to complement what we as governments and the EU as a multilateral body investing heavily in 3Cs countries, let's never forget that, what could be done by private sector to complement all that effort. Because we believe that, of course, if you are at the lower level of development, then each and every dollar or euro invested in our economies by definition should earn a higher return on investment. So we are a competitive region because of this investment gap, what IMF now has quantified for us. In addition, we are all the 3Cs countries part of the EU common market, which means that cross-border investment in the region should be relatively doable, easy to find. We can show, we already have the track record of participating in Connecting Europe facilities projects. So we can do cross-border investments. And then we are 102 million people. This is a huge market. This is a region which doesn't see itself as a common region, as a common market, but it is. It is 102 million people living in the fastest growing part of the European Union. Some of us are within the Eurozone, not each and everybody. But if you compare the growth of the region, then we outperform currently the rest of the European Union, again enhancing the capacity to attract capital. So, Free Seas Initiative has been coming together as presidents and business forum for years now. And from the beginning, we have heard from private sector investors that if we really wanted to invest not into individual countries of the Free Seas, but commonly for the Free Seas Initiative, how should we do it? And they have been seeking something which would have been a common vehicle, transparent one, and very importantly, impartial, so that the projects with the best return on investment should be financed. When Estonia took over the presidency of the Free Seas Initiative, we set to work to create precisely this. We cooperated with private sector. We chose Amber Capital Management as our private sector partner. We agreed with all the presidents and also governments, because we involved more operational level, which is governments in the Free Seas countries. We agreed that we will set the principles of financing, which means that the projects should relate to energy infrastructure and digital connectivity. And then we promised that we will let the Amber Capital Management to run the fund according to the rules of the market. So the choice of the projects actually will be impartial to Free Seas countries. There is no political influence, but on the other hand, there is strong political support to help us overcome the administrative difficulties which we might actually face. This summit will indeed now be partially virtually, partially really take place this autumn. It was supposed to take place already in June, but you know, we were not terribly unhappy because it was postponed, because in June we wouldn't have had already 6 countries paid into the Free Seas Fund, and also 2 more promising to pay in by the October date when the Free Seas Summit will actually take place. So we have made more progress since the summer. Why we have been, I would say, quite successful in finally crystallizing the structure of the Free Seas Initiative into the fund part and then the steering part of the President's Forum, as it will continue to be. This is very important to have all the presidents on board. I believe it was hugely supported also by United States, because noticing our progress towards more concrete fund, more concrete structure for Free Seas Initiative, Secretary Pompeo in February promised $1 billion of investment in case the Free Seas countries and the private market will put in a similar amount of money. And also the US House, US House has actually put forward a resolution which we hope will be well supported in a bipartisan format quite soon. So US has been a strong supporter of the Free Seas Initiative all the road while we have been walking this road. We are finding this support by US important in this sense that it validates our efforts to bring in the private capital. The private capital from US as well would feel probably more comfortable with the initiative in case we have also the public involvement there. We also want to raise money from the market so that our fund would be hopefully 3 to 5 billion big. And you know, we also have the ambition to prove the concept by this first fund of the Free Seas. Since the IMF report dealt also with a wider region, I would also air my thinking on the Free Seas future. And this has been, as Fred, you know, for a long time now, that if this first fund proves successful, we could work in the same format for Ukraine, for Balkan countries. Already now, the Free Seas Fund can invest in these countries in case one end of the project is somewhere in Free Seas countries. So I see we are globally reinvigorating the thinking that private money can help with development. This is extremely important. We should not forget it, even if it seems like governments have endless money today and maybe also next year. Let's spend the government's money on automatic stabilizers, helping the people to manage this crisis, and let's harness the private finance for the development needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that important opening comment, Madam President. Before I turn to the European Commissioner, let me ask you, Madam President, one follow-up question because it grows out of what you said. And this way I also bring in some questions from the audience, which I hope to do over this period of time. So Nemanja Starovic asks, do you think expanding the 3Cs initiative to include Serbia and the rest of the Western Balkans would be beneficial? And you've said yes, especially now when the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation is opening its first overseas office in Belgrade. That announcement just made a couple of days ago. Maybe in the context of answering this, you can also say, what is your priority for the summit October 19th? What is success for you October 19th?
Well, I have to say that for us, the success has been achieved on the way. The success is that we have the 3Cs fund and that we have member states contributing. But of course, we haven't yet heard the reaffirmation by United States that they will be really now rewarding our effort with also, well, formalizing their contribution. This would be the important achievement for us, and this would actually, I would say, seal the fate of the 3Cs fund, because this would bring in, as I said, more private, well, attention, therefore more private capital, because as I said, the fund should reach 3 to 5 billion. This is a huge amount of money still to rise. Indeed, what concerns Serbia and other Balkan countries and also Ukraine, which is always a special worry for us, because Ukraine actually also has a great economic potential, educated workforce, as do the Balkan countries. But there is an even bigger lack of investment, as also shown by the report by the IMF. If this model can be proven with the participation of Europe, with the participation of US, we also hope that with the participation of Germany and maybe other contributors from the rich world, this is right now the biggest single initiative to cooperate on the developed world side with the regions which are developed but face an investment gap due to occupation and due to Iron Curtain. Indeed, we see that this is only the first step, and indeed, I am quite sure that it will be successful, and it will indeed, next funds already invest more into the Western Balkans and also Eastern Partnership countries. I am quite sure that if we pull this off, it will be for a long time one of the most important initiatives also, if you look at it from the transatlantic viewpoint.
Thank you so much, Madam President. And now I'd like to turn to Madam Commissioner Kadri Simpson. Please give us your perspective on the 3Cs initiative. Will the new commission under President von der Leyen sustain the political support the Juncker Commission directed to 3SI, 3Cs initiative, or perhaps even build upon it? And how do you think this will fit in to the good work, excellent work the Commission has done over the last 3 decades in terms of its significant funding for Central and Eastern Europe? I think, there we go. No, you're still.
So now I think that we have solved this topic. Thank you, Fred, and dear Madam President, dear Kristalina Georgieva, all the participants. Well, greetings from this rainy Brussels, and I'm truly thankful and grateful to our host, the Atlantic Council, for the invitation of this timely event, because the topic of today's discussion, it is directly connected to one of the European Union's main tasks. So this is ensuring convergence and cohesion within European Union and between our regions and countries. And infrastructure and connectivity, both in energy sector and more generally, they are central to this strategic goal. And this is our common priority for the EU and to the US, as more investments and integration brings energy security and autonomy to the 3Cs region. And the security and diversification of supply are an important part of our strong transatlantic agenda, and a great example how we both benefit from working together. So let me now reflect in more detailed way on what I have heard today. Well, I have actually 3 points to make. First, I think that we all agree with the findings of the IMF report presented by Kristalina. They are very valuable and point to a real issue. And since the accession to the EU, our member states from Central and Eastern Europe, they have been following a path of convergence to the EU average in terms of GDP per capita. And this has been supported heavily by the European Commission through our so-called cohesion policy, with a budget of few hundred billion euros over 7-year periods. And this policy benefits mainly the region we are discussing today. In addition, the Commission has injected over the last 7 years more than 16 billion euros into the major cross-border energy and transport projects. However, the heavy legacy from Soviet times has still left important infrastructure gaps in the region, and these gaps are still holding back the full economic potential of the region. We know that COVID crisis will also impact both public and private spending, and this gap will need to be filled with smart investments that create jobs and growth, and that create them now, but also they have to contribute to a greener and more resilient and digital future. So this leads me to my second point. Europe moves towards climate neutrality by 2050, and to that end, earlier this month, the Commission proposed an increased ambition to cut greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030, so compared with 1990. And realizing this goal means taking actions in all sectors. We know that transforming Europe's energy and transport systems will be crucial to our success. And we need a step change in renewable energy deployment and sustainable transport solutions. This means investments in infrastructure, for example, in offshore wind, hydrogen production, or railway connections. Some initiatives like building renovation and installation of solar PVs can create positive impact through job creation on local level very quickly. And investments in green energy solutions in general are creating higher added value on growth and jobs than investments in traditional energy sector. So these green investments will receive support from the European Union budget. European Council has confirmed the Commission's proposal for a budget of 1.8 trillion euros for next 7 years, including 750 billion euro recovery fund. We call it Next Generation EU, and 30% of these funds must go to climate related activities. And third point I wanted to make, you asked how regional initiatives such as 3Cs could fit into this picture. The European infrastructure policy is based on the logic of a fully integrated internal market and also trans-European networks for energy and transport and digital. And in the energy sector, our priorities are energy security, competitiveness, and clean energy transition. In the Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe, the EU budget finances many important energy and transport infrastructure projects. They are also in the 3Cs project lists. For example, gas pipeline interconnecting Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Austria, or the synchronization of Baltic electricity network. In the transport sector, I would mention the new Rail Baltic railway connection. in addition to financial support, the Commission leads regional cooperation to help the realization of cross-border energy infrastructure. For example, the Baltic Energy Market Interconnection Plan, or we call it PEMIP, and the Central and Southeastern Europe Energy Connectivity High-Level Group, we call it CESEC. These arrangements cover many of the 3Cs countries. And likewise in transport sector, the European coordinators for the core network corridors. They are high-level political figures who are helping to bring along the realization of important projects of the area. And the aims of the 3Cs initiative and the goals of EU policy, they are complementary. So we want to achieve economic growth and more cohesive Europe. We want to achieve it by delivering the infrastructure investments that these regions do need, and we should build on the excellent work already done and pool our efforts to achieve this. And the IMF report is a very useful tool in getting this, and it can provide timely input for the preparation of the post-crisis recovery plans, because all the member states, they can use our funds after they will present the recovery and resilience plans. So once again, I want to thank the Atlantic Council for bringing us together today, and happy to take follow-up questions if you have any.
Thank you so much for that very important statement, and the statement of how you are seeing what's happening in the 3Cs initiative as complementary to the Commission's approach to foster needed infrastructure development. Very interesting comment. So before I turn to a couple of on-camera questions, there is a question that's come in from Piotr Novak, Madam Commissioner, that I think fits with this. And he talks about how within the 3Cs countries, there's a lack of expertise for cross-border investment, but that expertise, and the report done by the IMF, which you praise and rightly praise, talks about how it would increase GDP, increase wealth, and how important also in unemployment these infrastructure projects are. Here's his question. Is it possible the European Commission will persuade the European Investment Bank, which has excellent knowledge in cross-border investment projects, to strongly participate and support the 3Cs initiative?
Well, thank you for a very good question, and I must say that actually our member states, they do have pretty good experience already to implement cross-border projects. This is for energy interconnections, we can name several good interconnection projects that are either implemented or under the construction. For us, our recovery plan will be created around two priorities. So there will be dual transition, climate-related investments and digital investments. And to achieve our climate-related targets, we do need better connected energy markets. We need cross-border interconnections, and we will urge our member states to prepare these kind of initiatives. So if the question about IMF, have followed IMF's decision that they will become a climate bank. Their investments will be dedicated to climate-related targets, and by doing so, they will help us and our member states to achieve the aims that our president has so prominently announced, and doing so, we also know that that European Investment Bank has decided that after the end of 2021, they will not finance any fossil fuel projects. This is also so about about, for example, natural gas projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me go to two on-air questions, and I'll take them one after the other, and then let me come back. I don't want to run out of time before going to all three of you to give some reflections on these questions and the way forward. So if I could turn first to Oda Aberdeen, President of OAI and Advisors. He's also a board director of the Atlantic Council. And then after he asks his question, we'll turn to Adam Hitchcock, the co-founder and managing partner of Sovereign Infrastructure Group. So Oda, first to you.
Thank you, Fred. May I make a comment and then ask a question?
Absolutely.
I
But
enjoyed
because
listening
we don't
to-
want to run out of time.
I enjoyed listening to your distinguished speakers. I have one idea that has came into my mind right away. The 3Cs initiative covers a region that has a significant population and over $1 trillion GDP. This is an area that has not been very familiar with the sovereign wealth funds in the Emirates, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, and other countries. So I do see a major opportunity in the sectors that we outlined: energy, telecommunications, digital technology. So there is an opportunity there. Just to give you an example, one of the sovereign wealth funds last year committed 20 billion to Blackstone. And this is a far more significant undertaking. So my questions are as follows to your three distinguished guests. First, what are you doing to get the US to commit $1 billion? A US commitment will give these sovereign wealth funds more confidence, and they will be more open to, I think, having a European investment bank or Germany put some commitment will also enhance. Now, these countries want good projects. They're looking beyond oil for a stream of income that will pay dividends, coupons, and other sources of income. So I'll start with Her Excellency, the President of Estonia. What are you doing to try to engage some of the sovereign wealth funds to look at this initiative? What opportunities are there? What can you assure them about a question that Madam from the IMF said there are governance issues? They're concerned about these issues. And finally, with the Energy Commissioner from the European Union, can you envision the European Union coordinating with the 3Cs initiative to help attract investment sovereign wealth funds? I think the funds are available. There is plenty of liquidity, but they need to be more educated about the 3Cs countries and the potential for return. In some, they want good, solid projects.
So thank you, Oda. There is a huge amount of wealth in the sovereign wealth funds. Let's plant those questions for a moment. Hold them in your memory, all three of our speakers, and let me turn to Adam Hitchcock for his question. Then I'll come back to all three of you.
Thanks, Fred, and congratulations to everyone on the progress of the 3Cs initiative. Establishing the fund is a great advancement of the goal of driving private capital into the region. As a private investor, I've found my interaction with 3SI to be very productive. Honestly, this is a contrast to my firm's experience working with other DFIs who can be very difficult to work with, and we often see inconsistencies between their public statements and their actions. That hasn't been the case with 3SI. With that in mind, how do you plan to build on the success of the fund? I mean, I think it's fantastic, but it's not sufficient to meet the needs of the region because of two things. One, its size, but also because it's equity, not debt. And so will you be doing things to formalize an ongoing dialogue with the debt capital markets, like establishing a secretariat or a syndications team. I ask because my firm, we focus on credit investments in the infrastructure space and are very bullish on the region and think there are lots of cross-border projects even that we could finance using debt, 100% debt, while allowing countries to retain ownership of the assets. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I think, given that we only have 7 or 8 minutes left, I'll go in reverse order of how we started, starting with the commissioner, then to the president of Estonia, and then to the managing director of the IMF to answer the questions you've been posed and make any final comments you want to make. The questions, we're not going to get to all the questions in the chat room. Some of them for the commissioner question whether it's really realistic not to fund anything to do with fossil fuels, given the fact that the transition is going to be a long one. Others are asking about membership and others becoming members of the 3 Cs, Madam President. Greece is on the Black Sea, it's EU, for example, Ukraine, etc. But let me turn to the 3 of you because we're not going to get to all of those questions, but let's deal with what we've had so far in the 2 questions that just came in. First to you, Madam Commissioner.
Thank you. And I hope that I'm unmuted. So the Commission, well, here in Brussels, well, itself we have been very active on making sure that there will be more private investments and private capital pooled for the delivery of European infrastructure, because private capital is clearly needed to bridge the investment gap we are facing. And if we are talking broadly on the energy sector investments, then sovereign wealth funds can be an indispensable part of the ongoing transition. And this transition is to a sustainable low carbon economy, and renewable energy assets, they do correspond perfectly to what these funds are looking. This is stable, long-term returns to service their long-term obligations by making sure that they would not end up with stranded assets. And until now, solar and wind projects have been the main targets of these funds. So yes, we do see gas, natural gas, as useful tool for the transition period, but this transition period will not last for long. And this is also the position from the European Investment Bank. So as I was mentioning earlier, they have announced its plan to put 1 trillion euros of investment into climate and environmental action. They will do so in the upcoming decade. And by 2025, already half of their financing goes into green actions. So they have committed to end financing fossil fuel projects, and not doing so by ideological grounds, but because of the business case. The green investments are more secure. And from EU-owned funds, since 2015, we have created, together with the European Investment Bank, an European Strategic Investment Fund with a joint guarantee of 33.5 billion euros. So this FC is expected to unlock 500 billion euros of additional investments from the private capital by this year already. And energy, transport and digital infrastructure has been a center of this fund. And for the next 7 years, an instrument called InvestEU, building on the success of this previous FC fund, this InvestEU is expected to bring additional 650 billion euros of investments. And again, infrastructure investments are expected to attract big majority of those investments, and infrastructure investments into into electricity grids, renewables, offshore wind, but also gas interconnections, if they are future-proof, if they can accommodate also hydrogen and other clean gases. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Madam President.
Yes, first of all, to Mr. Hitchcock, coherence, I believe, comes from first having to agree among ourselves, and we are many partners. Estonia has created a technical secretariat for the Free Seas Initiative, and for the private investors, Amber Capital Management is probably the best place to ask the questions. I am quite sure that we will perpetuate this secretariat also into the future. What relates to the investment funds like Kuwait Fund, for example, I was on state visit to Kuwait and my chief of staff when we had mentioned the Free Seas Initiative and the fund project, which we have had to leave early to be able to be in London because the Kuwait Fund wanted to have additional information right away. So indeed, the fund is open for private investment up to 2 years, and thereafter we have to take stock and indeed, if possible, create the next fund, either with the same address, the Free Seas countries, or expand it to the second tier of the countries. And I am more thinking of Eastern Partnership and Balkan countries than EU15, I have to say here, simply because we together make a clear business case. Behind the Iron Curtain, we lag behind. Therefore, we need a minimum of 3, a maximum of 8% of the GDP of investment in the coming years to fulfill 50% of the gap by 2030, as calculated by the IMF. This is a clear-cut business case. Then there is the question of where will be the space for private investors if there is also the EU money. I give you a very simple example. Offshore grid of Nordics and Baltics, for example. Grid will be public investment supported by the European Union, but nobody's going to build production capacity on that grid. Baltic Connector, the gas connection between Estonia and Finland, able to take also 30% of hydrogen if needed. Again, connector supported by the EU, but the terminals, the hydrogen facilities, they are not public investment projects. They will be private. So there is ample space to complement what the Union is doing as infrastructure with the supportive private investment.
Madam President, thank you so much. And Madam Managing Director, I turn to you as for the final word in this really rich and powerful discussion. And I go back to what you said in the very beginning about how governance is going to be so important, but I look forward to your final comments.
Thank you very much. And I would really just compliment what has already been so clearly said. One, the Three Seas Initiative, because of the orientation towards long-term infrastructure investment in what is the future of the European and, for that matter, global economy, digital and green, with the advantage of the constant improvement in regulatory environment of the European Union, is attractive to long-term investments like sovereign wealth funds. So as projects are being generated, I would expect this attractiveness to grow, especially on the background of the boost that comes from the new generation EU and from the overall mobilization of Europe with very clear priorities. So on that question, of course, it is for the initiative, not for the fund, but we do see an advantage in offering at this moment in time long-term return on investments in a predictable regulatory environment. And I cannot stress enough how important it is for Europe to continue to strive for simplicity and predictability. And that takes me to the equity versus debt question. They don't exclude each other. Equity investment doesn't mean that there cannot be issuance of debt. And in fact, what the EU has announced recently in terms of priorities for the completion of the European actions around the Capital Markets Union, this is very relevant for the discussion we are having today. Among other things, what the Capital Markets Union wants to do is to make it much more viable to have cross-border investments in Europe, strengthen investment protection, and to make insolvency rules across Europe more harmonized, all very relevant to attract money, especially long-term, whether it's equity or debt. And of course, the Capital Market Union hopefully would give a helpful boost also to the 3Cs initiative. I want to complete with two very simple points. One, from all I have heard in this 1 hour, I have no doubt the cat is very much awake. Two, I want to thank you, the Atlantic Council, for having the longevity of engagement and commitment to this region, to help also crystallize ideas, bring a transatlantic partnership, and hopefully also support the President's aspiration for the October 19th to be a very pragmatic time of bringing not only strong words, but also strong action and financial commitments. So thank you, Mr. Camp. Thank you, dear Fred, for bringing us together today and for the role the Atlantic Council plays in these conversations.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Madam Managing Director Georgieva. I also want to thank President Kaljulaid. Everyone has to tune in for October 19th. We're going to very much look forward. We'll be sharing some of the things we're going to be doing in conjunction with that as well, including a collection of business leaders as well. And then Commissioner Stimson, thank you so much for your very useful and valuable comments. Just in closing, you thank the Atlantic Council, Madam Managing Director. So I'm going to thank the head of the Future Europe Initiative, Ben Haddad, Ian Brzezinski, who's looking after 3Cs for us, and Denise Forstuber, who's as his right hand doing such remarkable work. Thank you all for tuning in. We believe that there is geographic distance, but not social distance. So we've all come together very powerfully around this subject. And it's just terrific to have three such important voices take this sort of time. So thank you so much for taking your time and your efforts. This is one of many crucial projects, but I think this one in particular could unlock a lot of good. So thank you, and we all wish you the best with the rest of your days.